It is the biggest game in the world. 76,000 people inside the Louisiana Superdome, hundreds of millions watching on television. And on the very third play of the entire game, before most fans have even settled into their seats, a linebacker from West Virginia who was drafted in the 12th round, selected 317th overall, a player most scouts considered barely worth a roster spot, steps directly in front of the Philadelphia Eagles' first pass of Super Bowl 15 and takes it away. Clean, violent, decisive. That pick sets up the first touchdown of the game. Then he does it again in the second half. And then, when the game is almost over, when the Eagles are desperate and the stadium is already buzzing with the realization that something historic is happening, he does it a third time. 3 interceptions in 1 Super Bowl, a record that belongs to Rod Martin alone, and a record that, as of today in 2026, has never been broken in 45 years of Super Bowls since. That night, Rod Martin's face was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. The headline said, "Oh, what a feeling." So, why does almost nobody talk about him? Why is his name absent from Hall of Fame discussions while lesser players receive gold jackets? Why did the man who delivered the most dominant individual defensive performance in Super Bowl history spend his final years waiting for a call from Canton that never arrived? And why, when the Raiders needed someone to save a dynasty that was already cracking in 1983, was it Rod Martin who showed up again, sacking the Washington quarterback, stopping Hall of Fame running back John Riggins cold on a critical 4th down, and recovering a fumble to seal the championship? Roderick Darrell Morton was born on April 7, 1954, in Welch, West Virginia. His father was a coal miner, the kind of man who goes underground every day and comes back up covered in black dust, never guaranteed another shift. The kind of man whose life teaches you, without a single word being spoken, that nothing comes easy and nothing is handed to you. That lesson would define Rod Martin's entire football career. The family eventually moved to Los Angeles, and Martin grew up in California, attending Alexander Hamilton High School, where he was 2 years ahead of a young quarterback who would go on to become an NFL Hall of Famer, Warren Moon. Even at that level, Martin's instincts on a football field were apparent to anyone watching. He was a student of the game before he had the body to match the brains. He played 2 years at Los Angeles City College before transferring to the University of Southern California, the same program that would later produce Marcus Allen, a future Raiders legend. At USC in 1976, Martin was named a first-team All-Pacific Conference selection. He led the USC Trojans in tackles for losses that season, with 17 for 85 yards and recovered 5 fumbles. He was a weapon. But he was also undersized, coming into the pre-draft process at roughly 210 pounds, which was considered too light for a linebacker and too slow for a safety. He fell between the positions. Teams did not know what to do with him. So in the 1977 NFL Draft, Rod Martin was available all the way through 11 rounds. The Oakland Raiders, under head coach John Madden, used their 12th round pick, the 317th overall selection in the entire draft, to call his name. But that pick happened largely because Madden had a relationship with USC head coach John Robinson, who had once been a Raiders assistant. Madden called Robinson and asked if there was anybody still on the board worth taking in the late rounds. Robinson told him Rod Martin was better than anyone still available. Madden listened, and the Raiders got a steal so massive it borders on embarrassing for every other team that passed. But the road to Raiders stardom was not immediately smooth. After training camp in 1977, the San Francisco 49ers actually acquired Martin for a brief period, only to waive him before the season. He did not play a significant role in his first Raiders season. It was not until 1978 that he began starting games, filling in at inside linebacker. By 1979, he had settled into the weak side linebacker role and began starting every game. He made 115 tackles that season, 8 sacks, and nobody in the national media was talking about him yet. That was about to change in the most dramatic way possible. Before you can understand what Rod Martin did in Super Bowl 15, you have to understand how improbable everything about the 1980 Oakland Raiders really was. The Raiders went 11-5 during the regular season, but that record was good enough only for second place in the AFC West, The San Diego Chargers finished 11-5 as well and won the division on tiebreakers, which meant the Raiders were forced into the wild card bracket. They entered the playoffs as an afterthought, a road team for every round. Their quarterback situation had been a genuine crisis. Ken Stabler, the soul of the Raiders' offense for most of the 1970s, had been traded to Houston. His replacement, Dan Pastorini, broke his leg in the 5th game of the season. That forced third-stringer Jim Plunkett, a man who had already washed out of New England and San Francisco and spent years on the Raiders' bench as a career backup, into the starting lineup. Nobody believed Plunkett could get them anywhere. He was football's most famous castaway. But Plunkett won 9 of the 11 games he started, and the Raiders marched through the playoff bracket as a wild-card team, beating the Houston Oilers, the Cleveland Browns, and then the San Diego Chargers in the AFC Championship game, 34-27, to reach Super Bowl 15 in New Orleans.
The Philadelphia Eagles were waiting. They were 12-4 during the regular season. They were the NFC's top team. They had Ron Jaworski, one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in football that year, who had thrown for 3,529 yards and 27 touchdowns during the regular season. They had Wilbert Montgomery, who had rushed for 194 yards in the NFC Championship game alone. The Eagles were favored to win by 3 points. The Oakland Raiders were the underdogs, the wild card team that had no business being there. The team built around a comeback quarterback that nobody trusted and a defense full of names the casual fan did not know. One of those names was Rod Martin. January 25, 1981. The Louisiana Superdome, New Orleans. The game was played 5 days after the Iran hostage crisis finally ended, and the pregame ceremony honored the 52 Americans who had been held captive for 444 days. The patriotic atmosphere was unlike anything the Super Bowl had ever seen. It was that kind of moment. And then the football started, and Rod Martin immediately made it his own. On the 3rd play of the entire game, Eagles quarterback Ron Jaworski dropped back on a 2 tight end formation. He was targeting tight end John Spagnuolo on a crossing route. The Raiders were in a zone defense, and Martin had read the whole thing before the ball was snapped. He stepped directly in front of the pass, gathered it in, and returned it 17 yards to the Philadelphia 30-yard line. That is it. The Eagles' very first possession of the Super Bowl. 3 plays, and it is already over before it started. Jim Plunkett took the gift drive and capped it with a 2-yard touchdown pass to Cliff Branch. The Raiders led 7-0.
Later in the first quarter, Plunkett scrambled under pressure from his own 20-yard line, found running back Kenny King on a short route, and the pass deflected off cornerback Herm Edwards' fingertips and into King's hands as he turned and ran untouched all the way to the end zone. 80 yards, a Super Bowl record for the longest touchdown pass at that time. 14-0, Raiders. The Eagles had not had a chance to breathe. At halftime, the score was 14-3. Ted Hendricks had already blocked a field goal attempt. The Raiders' defense was suffocating everything Philadelphia tried. In the 3rd quarter, as the Eagles tried to mount something, Jaworski found himself in 3rd and 3 at the Raiders' 34-yard line. He threw into traffic, and Rod Martin was there again, stepping in front of the pass for his 2nd interception of the day. The Raiders turned that theft into a crisp bar field goal, making it 24-3. The Eagles finally answered with a touchdown early in the 4th quarter, an 8-yard pass from Jaworski to tight end Keith Krepfel, pulling it to 24-10. And here is where the Eagles had their only real window. 14 points down, still 14 minutes to play. Jaworski was capable of that kind of comeback. The stadium knew it. But then Rod Martin happened one final time. The Raiders punted, the Eagles took over, and Jaworski threw directly to Martin for interception number 3. The game was sealed. The Raiders ran out the clock and won 27-10, becoming the first wild-card team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl. 3 interceptions, 44 total return yards, 5 solo tackles, and 5 assisted tackles. Rod Martin had dismantled the Eagles quarterback as thoroughly and systematically as any individual player had ever dismantled an offense in Super Bowl history. His 3 picks tied linebacker Chuck Howley's all-time career Super Bowl record. But here is the critical distinction. Howley's 3 interceptions came across multiple Super Bowl appearances. Martin got all 3 in one afternoon.
Jim Plunkett was named the Super Bowl Most Valuable Player. He was brilliant, and he deserved enormous credit for his resurrection story. He completed 13 of 21 passes for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. Nobody should take that away from him. But Rod Martin was on the cover of Sports Illustrated that week, holding up 3 fingers, grinning, knowing exactly what had just happened. Many writers and former players argued then and have argued ever since that Martin should have been the co-MVP of Super Bowl 15. He himself acknowledged this years later with grace, never bitterness. He said, "Plunkett is one of my best friends. He is a brother to me. I have nothing against him. Maybe the voters. We could have been co-MVPs." He laughed when he said it. That was Rod Martin, a man who did things that deserved massive recognition and carried the absence of that recognition without resentment. That kind of character is rarer than the interceptions. 3 years later, the Raiders had relocated from Oakland to Los Angeles and had won the AFC West. But this was not the same team. The years between Super Bowls had brought roster changes, injuries, and the chaos that always follows a championship. The 1983 Los Angeles Raiders went 12-4 during the regular season, dominant and focused. And now they were playing the defending Super Bowl champions, the Washington Redskins, in Super Bowl 18 on January 22, 1984. Washington was the defending champion. Their running back, John Riggins, had rushed for 166 yards in Super Bowl 17 just 12 months earlier. He was the most powerful, punishing back in the game. Their quarterback, Joe Theismann, was the reigning NFL most valuable player. The Redskins were favored. And yet the Raiders won 48-9. It was a demolition. In that game, Rod Martin was once again in the middle of the biggest moments. Midway through the second quarter, with the Raiders holding a 14-3 lead, Washington drove deep into Raiders territory. Theismann threw on third down from deep in Raiders territory, and Martin broke it up, saving a touchdown. But the defining moment came near the end of the game.
Washington, trying to make it respectable, drove to the Raiders' 8-yard line. Theismann was sacked and stripped by Raiders safety Mike Davis. The ball came loose. Rod Martin dove on the fumble recovery. Ball game. His instincts, the same instincts that the NFL had questioned as too slow and too small a decade earlier, had put him in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment, exactly as they had in Super Bowl 15. He also sacked Theismann once and tackled Riggins for no gain on a key 4th-and-1 attempt. This was not a coincidence. This was who Rod Martin was. He was at his absolute best when everything was on the line. Marcus Allen's 74-yard touchdown run on the final play of the third quarter is what everyone remembers from Super Bowl 18, and Allen deserved every bit of the MVP trophy he received that day. But before that run happened, Rod Martin had already shut down multiple Washington drives. The run could not have happened without the defense that built the platform for it. Rod Martin was named a Pro Bowl player for the 1983 season, one of 2 consecutive Pro Bowl selections in 1983 and 1984. In 1984, he recorded a career-high 11 sacks and was named a first-team All-Pro. He was, during those 2 seasons, one of the 5 best linebackers in professional football. By the time Rod Martin retired after the 1988 season, his 12th with the Raiders, the accounting of his career was complicated by one significant fact. The NFL did not begin officially tracking sacks as a statistic until 1982, the year the Raiders moved to Los Angeles. Everything Martin recorded before that point had to be reconstructed from game logs and film review years later. The number that historians and statisticians arrived at was 56.5 career sacks across 165 games, 147 of which were starts.
Think about what that means. More than half of his career's most important pass rush statistic was essentially invisible to the official record for decades. He finished with 14 career interceptions, returned for 225 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He had 10 fumble recoveries and 10 forced fumbles. He scored 6 defensive touchdowns across his career. He played 165 games and started 147 of them. He never played a single snap for any team except the Raiders. He also spent those years alongside some of the most talented defensive players the NFL had ever assembled. His teammates included Hall of Famers Howie Long, Ted Hendricks, and Mike Haynes. The defensive backfield featured Lester Hayes, who won the 1980 Defensive Player of the Year award, and later Mike Haynes, one of the great cornerbacks of the decade. Playing in that company, Martin's individual contributions were frequently absorbed into the overall reputation of a dominant defense rather than attributed to him specifically. That is one of the quiet tragedies of great defenders on great defenses. When everyone is exceptional, the credit gets diluted. When Howie Long is recording sacks behind you, and Ted Hendricks is blocking kicks beside you, and Lester Hayes is ending drives in the secondary, The linebacker in the middle of all of it can become invisible, even when he is doing exactly what the defense needs him to do. Rod Martin was never invisible when it mattered most. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was holding up 3 fingers. He was the man who took the Eagles apart before the national audience, before most viewers had finished their first snack of the game.
Rod Martin was nominated for the Pro Football Hall of Fame multiple times across his eligibility window. He never received a serious finalist push. He never got the call. In September 2024, when he was nominated again as part of a senior candidates list, a television reporter in Las Vegas found Martin and his wife Devin to interview them about the news. The footage that came from that interview is genuinely difficult to watch if you know the full story. Devin Martin, holding her husband's hand, said, "My gosh, my goodness. We hugged, we cried, we jumped up and down. We said, finally, finally, it is so long overdue." Rod Martin, quiet and measured as always, simply said, "I love it. I have been waiting for this for a long time." He was 70 years old when he said that. He had held the Super Bowl interception record for over 40 years at that point. He had won 2 championships. He had been named to 2 Pro Bowls and 1 All-Pro team. And he was standing in front of a camera describing being nominated as if it were a miracle. He never made it to Canton. Rod Martin passed away on April 20th, 2026. He was 72 years old. He had held that Super Bowl record for 45 years. He died without the gold jacket that the Hall of Fame owed him. The Nevada State Senate responded to his passing by introducing Senate Resolution 93, formally acknowledging his legacy and calling for his posthumous induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. A state legislature had to step in and tell the Hall of Fame what it should have already known. That is where things stood. His wife Devin had called him a gentle giant. His teammates had described his football intelligence as supernatural. Former Raiders coach Paul Gutierrez wrote after his death that Martin had been an encyclopedia of knowledge about the silver and black, a man who was always available, always generous with his time, always willing to talk about football and about life, without anger and without self-pity.
He was the son of a West Virginia coal miner who became the most dominant individual defensive performer in a single Super Bowl in NFL history. He holds that record still in 2026, 45 years after he earned it. No linebacker, no safety, no cornerback has ever matched 3 interceptions in one Super Bowl game. Not one player in all the Super Bowls since has come close. Here is the question that every NFL fan should be sitting with right now. The Pro Football Hall of Fame exists to honor the greatest players the game has ever produced. It exists to preserve their stories, to make sure that generations of fans who were not alive when these men played can still know their names and understand what they did. Rod Martin set a Super Bowl record in 1981 that still exists in 2026. No player in all the time since has come close to breaking it. It is not even debated as one of the great individual Super Bowl performances. It is the great individual defensive performance of any Super Bowl ever played. 3 interceptions in the biggest game on earth against a quarterback who threw 27 touchdown passes that regular season, delivered by a man drafted 317th overall, who the entire league had nearly ignored. He came back 3 years later and did it again in a different way. Sacks, fumble recoveries, 4th down stops against one of the most powerful rushing attacks the game had seen. He played 12 seasons with one team, started 147 of 165 games, never asked to be traded, never complained publicly, and never received the one honor that his career objectively deserved. Rod Martin was a legend. He was a Raiders legend in the truest sense of that word. He was a Super Bowl hero in the truest sense of that word. And he was a Hall of Famer in the truest sense of that word, whether Canton ever officially says so or not. The record is there. It has always been there. 45 years, 3 interceptions, 1 game, 1 man.
His name was Rod Martin, and it is time the world knew it. If this video moved you, share it, subscribe, drop Rod Martin's name in the comments. Because the only way forgotten heroes stop being forgotten is when the people who know the truth decide to stop being quiet about it.